So if the seed encapsulates the idea of what the plant is, you can equally look at the other parts of it and the other elements and see how the variation between one remedy and another points to the expression of that element within the life or within the plant. Let's start on the earth. Which plant would we start with? Let's look at chicory. We mentioned chicory. Chicory it's got a root that is really more or less like a big parsnip. Because it's a perennial plant, and this root is where it stores the starch from one year to the next. And it goes very deep. And if you tried to take hold of chicory and pull it out by the roots, you would never manage to do that. It will always break. And this one, where it's being washed by water, is actually, you can see it's been cut in order to get it out of the ground. So if that's the surface of the ground there, this is where the stem, or stems in the case of chicory, come up from here. And actually it sends out some leaves across the ground like that at this node point. So this is the node where it's changing, if you like, it's changing state. And the fact that it has this very strong, deep root is significant in so far as it expresses the link between the chicory type and the earth, and its attachment to the earth. So we often think of chicory as a remedy. We often think of chicory as a remedy as being an expression of family and generations and a sort of flow on ancestral expression of a particular idea. So when you've had a family that's farmed in a particular part of the country, maybe for 300-400 years, you've got this great attachment and depth of feeling for the soil, but equally a very strong attachment and expression of feeling for the family and for the close-knit bond within the family. And that's expressed in chicory with this idea in the remedy state of needing others for whom we care to be close and to be within the kind of control, often of the mother, but it's not just a remedy for mothers. It's the need to keep the control of the ancestral title, let's say, to the land, is expressed in the imposition of values and thoughts and attitudes emotionally between the parents and the children. And then the children, in their projection up towards the parents, are making a similar kind of link and attachment. If we look at a different root system, we can see how it expresses itself very differently with a different plant. Let's think about Scleranthus. Scleranthus is basically it's an annual plant, and it grows in loose, soft soil. So once the seed germinates, it sends down a root system, but it's very threads thin and lacks any sort of expression of form. And you could say, okay, it's in the earth, that root system, but it's not of the earth, it's not attached to the earth. And it's very easy to pull it up. And this Scleranthus is generally a plant which grows in farmland where the soil is disturbed. You often see it actually with rabbits in a rabbit warren, and rabbits like soft sandy soil to make their homes, and this loose soil is very suitable to the Scleranthus person. So is the Scleranthus person somebody who's strongly attached to the past or to heritage or to family? No, absolutely not. So the root here is expressing a completely different attitude. You get a similar sort of root structure with rock rose. And again, there is not this strong attachment to the earth. Now, by looking at the plant, when you see it growing in the field, you don't know this about the root, but it's an expression of the idea and the element of earth. When it comes to the stem, which is the element of water, which is to do with communication, what happens with the scleranthus plant is that it grows up, like this, and at every node point where there's a junction and a little leaf, it takes a different turn and a different direction. So instead of having this clear, strong, straight stem, which is the impatiens person, you have here a confusion of multi-directional energy. And emotionally, which is the water element, you can say that an impatiens person always knows who they are, what they are, where they are, and which direction they're going in. They're, as I've suggested, they're cardinal, they're actually outgoing and directed in their approach to life. The scleranthus type has no idea which way to go. Is it this way? Is it that way? If it seems right on this side, then it's left on that side. And it's this changeable alternation of energy which is so completely expressed in the structure of the stems of the plant. Carrying on with scleranthus, we can say that the element of air, which is expressed in the leaf, is very interesting. The leaf on a scleranthus is that. It's nothing. It's just that. It really is another piece of stem. So instead of having the broad expanse of breathing, which you get in, say, impatiens, in the leaf, here the stem and the leaf are one and the same. So the air and the water are mixed. Perhaps that's why they get confused, because there isn't a clear separation of function, and lacking the clear separation of function means that they don't have the resource of clearly deciding to take one course as opposed to another. So there you get, in that, the expression of ambivalence, which is multidirectional. It can move in any way. Sorry. When it comes to the flower, and perhaps we should look at some other leaves first. Let's think, because I mentioned impatiens leaves. The impatiens leaf, the stem is very strong and clear, and when it comes to the node, the leaves come off. It's difficult to draw in 3 dimensions, but they come off very clearly in threes. So the geometry is of 3 around the stem, and there's a short petiole or leaf to the stem to the leaf, and then a very nice big clear spear form like this. And this leaf has a very clear central rib, and there's a clear symmetry about it. And what you could say about this, if this is an expression of the mentality, it's strong, it's clear, and it's directed. When you're with an impatiens person, I say that it leads with the head, so this is the mental element expressed in the body to some extent. It's got the idea and it's going to go for it. So this is like a spear insofar as it's being thrown in a direction. And every part of the leaf and every part of the plant gives a kind of further confirmation and expression to the nature of the individual. And here you see a serrated edge, which is the cutting edge, the kind of irritable temperament that you find expressed in the impatiens person. It is You can always hear it. It's like a sound, like a saw blade in its kind of irritable mindset. I don't like this. I don't want it. Please do it differently. Let me have it, please. Snatch it, grab it, make it go. Also with the leaves and with the stems, you get a different expression of the idea and the emotional state if it's got hairs or if it's smooth. Hairs on a plant express a kind of sensitivity towards the environment. So in agrimony, for instance, on the stem of the agrimony, there are millions and millions of small hairs. And this gives an expression of this idea of being sensitive to what is around, to the environment in which the person finds themselves, and very sensitive to the feeling when it's on the stems, and acutely aware of what other people are feeling and what other energies and expressions of feeling are coming towards the agrimony person. Impatiens, nothing. Impervious. It's a smooth surface. I don't take any notice of what you are feeling because I'm totally occupied with what I'm feeling. So this smooth-stemmed person is actually impervious to the surroundings that they're working within, which is fine because they would much rather work alone anyway, because it enables them to get on with the directed purpose of their life. Go back to impatiens, think back to the root. The roots are not of any great significance. That's why it grows by the water, so that the roots have a ready supply of water. They don't have to go and search for the water. And there's no great attachment to the earth. They're here on the earth, which is the seed being powerfully put into the earth. And all the expression here is, I know what my life purpose is, and I want to get on with it. So different to the scleranthus, who doesn't even know what to have for breakfast, let alone what to do with life. This smooth, glabrous leaf, as it's called, the smooth leaf, means again, there is no sensitivity. If I have an idea and I want to express it to you, this is what it's going to be. I'm telling you how it is. You say to me, but Julian, had you thought of that? No, I'm not interested in that. I'm telling you what it is. That's the expression of an impatiens thinking process. I know. I know who I am. It's very clear. I can tell you if you're quick, but if you take too long and you want to kind of altercate and discuss it, I'm sorry, I've got things to get on with, no time. What about chicory? Would chicory have hairy leaves, hairy stems? Are they sensitive to other people, or are they actually isolated? No, they're very sensitive. Sensitive to themselves and their own feelings, and sensitive to the feelings of those around, immediately around them. So there you see a kind of possessiveness as an aspect of this sensitivity. Of course, the most potent expression of the plant has to be in the flower. That's where all the growth is leading towards the flower. And the flowers are what we use in making flower essences. So to go into detail about the flower on every plant it would take a book or several books, because there is so much to be explored. If we go back to scleranthus, the flowers on scleranthus are very, very small. They're about the size of the tip of this pen. And they're a little cup, like that. And, well, that's it. There's lots and lots and lots of them. They are green, and they have 5, what I suppose are tepals. They're neither sepals nor petals, but a kind of cross between the two. Because whereas, let's say, a rose has beautiful, wide petals, 5 of them, here you've got this, but there's no extent in the petal. And interestingly, once they flower, that's what they are. They stay like that for the rest of the time. They maybe 3, 4, 5 months before the plant dies back, and for the winter. And so the seed, which forms inside here, actually is a permanent process. It's like, that's it, it's stuck there. Doesn't move, doesn't change, there's no growth or, I don't know, there's no bringing in of experience in order to project into the future for the next generation. We've looked at the seed of clematis, but what's so interesting with clematis is that it actually changes form a lot. That's, on one flower head you have both the stamens, the male bearing part of the plant, and the stigma, which is the female, which are in the middle here. But each one of these is a separate flower, in fact. It's a compound plant, and each one of those creates a seed in here, and as these fall away, the male part of the flower falls away, and these grow out, and they develop like this. So what you'd say about clematis and scleranthus is that they are both of them perhaps very much living in the mind to some extent, unable to be rooted in the earth in the way that impatiens is, but the clematis is always moving. It's like it's moving in the imagination, dreaming into a different changing future, whereas the scleranthus sits there absolutely unable to decide which road to take, so it doesn't change, it doesn't move. And in fact the whole plant with scleranthus, the whole plant is about and resolved and within that place there, which is the resolution of these 4 directions on the surface of the ground where the stem goes into the root. And it's the resolution of that which is so critical within the life. Now, this may sound a complicated way to look at the remedies, but I'm suggesting that if one goes through the details of these things, it's possible to see why and how Bach would choose a plant like this in order to make a remedy for, this is what he writes, those who suffer much from being unable to decide between 2 things, first one seeming right, then the other. They are usually quiet people and bear their difficulty alone, as they are not inclined to discuss it with others. There's a general statement that you can make about the plants, which is obviously to do with the colour, particularly the colour of the flower. Scleranthus, the flower is green, which tells you again about what happens on this cross point, where the mixing of yellow and blue is what makes green. It's where the sunlight, which is yellow, coming towards us, meets the earth, where the green occurs, before travelling on into space, where the light going away from us is blue. So green, by definition, is on the crossroads of the spectrum. When it comes to the colour of the impatiens flower, Bach is very specific about this. He says, use the pale mauve flowers, not the hot red ones. And the colour within the flower, again, it carries information and an experience in terms of what the energetic properties are within the plant. It's not entirely clear what that means. But what colour is a stop? traffic light. It's red. Red is coming towards you. It's assertive, it's moving, it's dynamic. Whereas green, which actually says go, is much more recessive, much more, and blue even more so. So you could say the dynamic energy which is within the flower is part of that is expressed in the colour. And another part of it is expressed in the shape, the form of it. With impatiens, you wouldn't think it, but impatiens has 5 petals. But they're fused together into this very exotic shape, which, well, it's very difficult to draw, so something like that. And it's hanging here. This is where the entrance to the flower. And so when you come to the expression of impatiens in the flower, what we see is that very incisive, directed attitude. In the flower, it's dissolved and broken, and the form of it is dispersed and changed. So within the plant, you have both the, if you like, the tension in the stem, because there you see it, it's almost like muscles in the lines of energy that are in the stem, and the irritable, cutting temperament expressed in the edge of the leaf. And yet in the flower, these pale mauves are just the opposite. They're the release of the form, the dispersal of this tense structural energy. With clematis, what does the structure of the flower tell you? It's like one of those advertisements you used to see for sort of a mentalist, where sort of great rays of energy are coming into the third eye. And indeed, it's really quite hard to say whether this form is raying out energy or whether it's actually taking it in. But you can see in the structure of it, it's all about focusing down to a point, which is indeed what the clematis person needs. What does Bach say for clematis? It says, those who are dreamy, drowsy, not fully awake, no great interest in life. Quiet people, again like the Scleranthus, quiet people, not really happy in their present circumstances, living more in the future than in the past, living in hopes of happier times when their ideals may come true. In illness, some make little or no effort to get well. Do you remember that? Going back to the idea of him observing, remember going back to him observing patients in hospital and what their prognosis would be and how that would be determined by the outlook of the person. In illness, some make little or no effort to get well, and in certain cases may even look forward to death in the hope of better times, or, maybe, meeting again some beloved one whom they have lost. So you have here the expression of the gesture of the plant wanting to get away, but also in the flower focusing back in. It's very beautiful, isn't it? So going back for a moment to these elements, we talked a little bit about the earth and how that is an expression of the aptitude and the relationship between the individual and their life on earth, in this life, and the ancestral links to that. Water as the element of distribution of the energy and the sugars and the starch within the plant. Air as the lungs, and I mean they very really are that, because that's where the exchange between the surrounding air in the plant and the oxygen and carbon dioxide within the plant That's where the exchange takes place. Just as we have hemoglobin and it carries the oxygen in oxyhemoglobin on the surface of the lining of the lungs, and that's transferred into the blood system and distributed through. So here you have chlorophyll, which, like hemoglobin, is actually doesn't take part in the action of the carrying, the transport of carbon dioxide in this case, into the plant. And we could say about the lungs that they're an expression of how we interact with the world around us, because what we breathe in, we're taking in, and what we breathe out, we're giving out. So it's a constant dynamic of exchange between ourselves and our environment, which you get in the leaf. But all of these three are moving in the direction of the apogee of growth, the high point of the growth, which is the flower. Now, in a plant, the flower is the place where the creation of the future takes place, insofar as it's the seed. But we'd equally say of a human being, we speak of the flowering of a particular life in the direction in which it's moving as being the point that it's trying to achieve. So the idea of fire as being the element associated with the flower is because this is the point of transformation. It's the place of change, the change of state, where the possibility is to move to, if you will, a higher level of consciousness. Just as the plant is intent upon building towards the flowering, so a human life is intent upon evolution, not in the Darwinian sense of evolution of species, but evolution of consciousness, a growth and development of the higher faculties of consciousness. It's what we call consciousness, but it's the spiritual dynamic, it's the spiritual element. So if this is physical, this is emotional, this is mental, then this certainly, the fire level, is the spiritual dimension within a human life. Why the Bach flower remedies are so significant is because they actually work with all these levels in an integrated way, in a complete expression of that process of coming towards evolution and growth and change. Remembering back that Bach saw these 12 type remedies as being archetypal soul lessons. This is what we are born with, this is what we come here to learn, this is what the purpose of our life is for. Not just to have a good time, not even to propagate, but to actually develop soul flame certainties, you might say, the development of the qualities that we need in order to grow as human beings or as human souls. That's what Bach would say. Now, that may not be the language which appeals to everybody. If you simply say, I have a headache and I'd like to take some combination of remedies to enable me to feel better, that's absolutely fine. But Bach is very, very clear about what his work is for. And it is in order to allow us to learn and change and be happier. Because if you're tense and irritable all the time, you're not happy. If you're always afraid, you're not happy. If you're afraid of what is happening in your life around you, how can you possibly fulfill your potential? Now, there is a question, which is, how is it possible that the information or the remedy made from these flowers can help me to change my mind? Well, we've got to come on to that. But that's what it's about. So having first formulated these 12 types and then gone to search over quite a period of time, actually, over, let's see, 4 years, 5 years, Dr. Bach came and found that there were 12 plants from which he made a remedy which was going to be of use and of help to these 12 types of people. And then he puts them to work. He actually applies them. He gives some of the material to friends, and they put them through their, let's say, their paces as remedies, and sees whether or not they're working and how good they are. But in 1933, he says this: "It will be found that certain cases do not seem to fit exactly any one of the 12 healers, and many of these are such as those who have become so used to disease that it appears to be part of their nature, and it's difficult to see their true selves, because instead of seeking a cure, they have adapted themselves and altered their lives to suit the disease." And this is a very clear reference to chronic conditions, where it's like an accretion of a shell that has formed around the individual, so that you don't see their true nature, but you only see this chronic condition of hopelessness or struggling on or tiredness and exhaustion. And these are the 7 helpers. The first is gorse, then oak, then rockwater, heather, olive, vine, and wild oat. So again, each of these refers to a plant or a tree, except for this one, rockwater, which Bach says is to be made from the spring water at a holy well. Now we'll come in a moment to how does he make the remedies and how the process develops, but for the moment let's look at these as a group of remedies. We've got the 12 and now the 7. Gorse is a remedy for hopelessness, when we've been ill for so long that we no longer believe that it's possible to change or to get better or even hope for any improvement. And he says that if somebody in that condition can be persuaded to try again, to make another effort to get well, then there is actually going to be a change in the vitality, and they may be able to step out from this encasement of disease and ill health that has become a part of them. It's quite interesting with each of these to see why Bach chooses them and how the form and gesture of the plant expresses the idea that's within the remedy. With gorse, for instance, this is a plant that begins flowering as we come towards winter. Completely the opposite of what you normally expect from plants. Plants, once spring comes, they start to flower and grow and grow into the summer. But with gorse, it begins at the end of the summer and it grows in intensity, in light, as it moves towards spring. So it's very much an expression of bringing light into darkness, and the idea of reanimating the individual is a very strong expression of this remedy. It's also, though, to some extent, giving them a kick, because if you look at the leaf form, which is this very spiky, sharp leaf, so the idea here is very strongly to jab such a person back into making another effort and re-establishing the vitality of the system. And when you look at the plant, it's dead within. I can't go into all the details of this now, but it's all there very clearly to be seen in the films which we've made, and also it's clearly described in Form and Function, which tells you in detail how the form of the plant expresses the function as Bach described it in the flower remedies. Olive, very interesting remedy, very widely used. He says it's for exhaustion, when we actually have no reserves left. And this is of course a Mediterranean tree, very, very long lived, and yet it has the capacity to grow again, to re-establish itself by sending up suckers and shoots. Even when it's cut down completely, from the roots will come new life. So a similar idea, but whereas this one is perhaps physical exhaustion, closer to the earth, this one is more an exhaustion of the soul forces that have given up hope. So giving olive to somebody who's in a gorse state is not going to help. It's not enough just to make them physically more alert and alive, more energetic. They need to change their mind. They need to have a kind of new approach to their problems and their situation. Wild oat, says Bach, this is a grass, and this is, he says, a direction finder, and helps us when we've lost the way, when we don't know which path to take in life. And it hangs in the air and has this very graphic sense of being by the side of the road but not in the road, not knowing which path to take. So these are situational remedies which describe where we may find ourselves on life's journey. So we start out with this intention, but then we get, rather like Dorothy on the yellow brick road in The Wizard of Oz, we get drawn away from our true life purpose. And these 7 helpers are there to bring us back to ourselves, bring us back into the way of the true path of our lives.